Hi. So, I'm kind of in an awkward state. See, I'm supposed to review your micro, and you're my favorite character. Like, my absolute fave. I cheer for your struggles, and I delight in your triumphs. I find you absolutely adorable. And the truth is, I see so much of how I used to be growing up in you, and I'm sorry, Fluttershy. I don't like your micro comic. I think it's the weakest entry in the miniseries. I mean, it's supposed to be your chance to shine, but instead it focuses so much on your self-doubt, and the ponies in it are all jerks, and it gets rarity wrong, and it's just such a mess. I don't want to dislike your micro comic. But I must be resolute. For I am a reviewer, and I seek not only to entertain, but to illustrate what doesn't work, in the hopes that some young writer or artist out there might improve their own craft. It is the ideal that encourages me to keep producing videos. So I shall face you, Fluttershy Micro, my least favorite, and I shall see where things went astray. But you're still my fave. Fair warning to y'all. I'm going to be talking about the Fluttershy Micro and the antagonist from Spice Up Your Life. So if you haven't seen that episode yet, please do. First question to ask going into this is, what do I look for in a micro comic? The term micro might be misleading since these stories do include appearances by more than just one member of the main six. The focus is on a single member, but they're by no means isolated. Not to mention that additional characters like Luna, Celestia, the CMC, and Spike all got their turn. I think it comes down to how each comic shows the best and worst of a character. The lead heroine might slip up along the journey, but by story's end we get to see them rally and show their best. That's one of the primary things missing from Fluttershy's micro, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We begin with Fluttershy on her way to visit her animal friends with the demon spawn, Angel Bunny. And right off the bat, we hit my first criticism: the artwork. By no means the worst in IDW's lineup, there is still a disconnect. Take a look at this comparison between Fluttershy's micro and one of the more recent issues from the main comic line. Both are drawn by Tony Fleecs, although Heather Breckel handled the coloring for the later issue. But let's leave the coloring out for a minute. Take a look at how Fleecs' work has improved over time. Fluttershy's head is more proportionate to her body. The curve of her muzzle is more aligned with where she's looking. Her body and front leg are thinner. Put simply, I'm glad that Fleecs has become more comfortable with drawing ponies. Now let's bring the color back into play. Notice how Fluttershy is the only element that has colored lines? The rest of the image, from buildings to trees to butterflies, is lined with black. The end result is that Fluttershy looks out of place, whereas drawing her with black lines helps her match the setting and creates a crisper image. Speaking of not fitting in, Fluttershy is suddenly tempted by an announcement for Princess Celestia's Extreme Art Test. The scroll promises that there are medals to be awarded. Well, as long as there isn't a medal for participating, I'm cool with this. Seriously, the real award for participating is that you actually did something. Succeed or fail, it's more than zero. Yet one might ask why Fluttershy is frenzied for an art contest. Well, for that answer, to the Flutter Cave! Okay, she calls it the Chamber of Extreme Knitting, or the Place of Friendly Pony Grotesqueries.
It's a working title!
Back to the art, I'm impressed by the texturing on the quilted creations. It looks like they were created using a pattern fill in either Photoshop or Illustrator, but the end result conveys the texture without distracting from the form, including one of the storm imps from Rainbow Dash's micro. Tony Fleecs must really love these guys because he features them in so many backgrounds. At first I wanted to give this comic props for taking a minor element from the show and expanding it further. I do appreciate it, but as we go along, that same strength can backfire. Namely, this comic falls into a pitfall that undermines Fluttershy across multiple mediums. Writers tend to show her as either a coward or a psychopath. No middle ground.
Going to love it!
As funny as that scene was, I think it's damaged Fluttershy in the long run. I'd wager anyone who has presented their work has had a moment of anxiety. Yet as she starts shooing the staff away and glaring daggers while under disguise, I get the impression we're entering Flanderization territory. So let's take a look at her Hachimachi! Okay, she wins. I mean, she made that while most other art pieces in the background are IDW covers put through a Photoshop filter. Though, odd question, how are all those butterflies staying aloft? Unfortunately, she's also using a lot of multisyllabic words to tell the audience what it's supposed to mean. followed closely by a simpler summary for comedy, which brings us to 2 points. The first being that I'm thinking of this scene.
The arm size tight, the midi collar doesn't go with the shawl lapel, the hems are clearly machine stitched, the pleats are uneven, the fabric looks like toile, used a back stitch here when it clearly called for a top stitch or maybe a traditional blanket stitch, and the over design is reminiscent of prêt-à-porter and not true French haute couture.
I get that a lot of fans don't see potential in Fluttershy's character. Had we only gotten the first season, I think this would have been her most standout character scene. It demonstrates an element of her that we never saw elsewhere. But at the same time, I get the impression that this comic is no longer drawing inspiration from that scene. Instead, it's allowing the scene to dictate terms. Fluttershy used some unique terms then, so they'll create some confusing text here. She dictated terms to Rarity, but now she's combining words that work individually but come together to create a nonsensical mess. This leads to my second point. Art is an expression of ideas. Same as storytelling, art can convey an idea that can't be expressed through summarization. Pablo Picasso's Guernica, his most famous work, was all about expressing anger at the Spanish Civil War and the destruction brought on innocents. In many ways, it conveyed his feelings more powerfully than a speech or essay. Fluttershy's bubble about transformative spirals is just blather. But how much meaning would this have had if Fluttershy had reflected upon her own challenges while creating this piece? I fear we skipped an important step by going from Fluttershy's declaring an intent to being at the contest. We needed less jokes and more reflection. Up to this point, the comic's been pretty balanced. Some weak elements offset against good ideas. It's with the appearance of art critic Praiser Pan that things start to go downhill. Critic is a generous term since he doesn't really comment on the art. I want to say that this guy is a Shyamalan-esque straw man of all critics.
There is no originality left in the world, Mr. Heap. That is a sad fact I've come to live with.
But the sad part is I recognize this behavior online. A lot of people wear the mask of reviewer, analyst, or critic when really it's all about personal attacks. Some ponies think that a pot of glue and a pile of junk makes for art. Clean your barnyard without inflicting the remains on us, will you? Some other ponies think we enjoy seeing their trite little collections on display. Ladies and gents, I give you 90% of anonymous online comments. Bad enough that Fancy Pants is tagging along, because I still think he's a decent guy and wouldn't agree to this. But Rarity's in the group too. Now, Rarity's always been opinionated on fashion and the like, but I've never seen her try to discourage some pony. For any mistakes she's made, she's always tried to impart confidence.
Although, you would look rather dapper in a tuxedo.
Rarity belongs in this group as much as she belongs in a mud pit. Rather than getting sidetracked going on about Praiser Pan and why I find him a sad reflection of online criticisms, that's what supplement videos are for. This is Fluttershy's comic, and when Praiser Pan goes after her work, she tries to quietly correct him. The thing is, I've never thought highly of an artist being on hand to correct a viewer for not appreciating their work. Yet Praiser Pan tries to dismiss her by saying she doesn't have any credentials. An odd tactic, given that he's made no mention of the 5 elements of art, form, line, color, space, and texture, nor is he commenting on the 5 elements of design, alignment, repetition, contrast, proximity, and balance. He's just been spitting venom, so what good is his own education if he's not using it? And he nearly chases Fluttershy off when Rarity sees through the disguise and, showing no concern for her friend's timidity, drags her out before every pony. With the artist now exposed, Praiser Pan launches a barrage of judgments. This extreme piece came from someone as inconsequential as you? Oh gosh, I just realized. Praiser Pan is part of the extreme generation. Do the do. And everyone starts weighing in. Uninteresting, dull, unfashionable, hardly fit for the competition, amateur work, tragic waste of materials.
That's a label too. These are just all labels. You just label everything.
Rarity, meanwhile, coaches Fluttershy to be proud of her creation and to not let an ungrateful audience bring her down. In many of the micros, some pony needs help and it's up to the heroine of the hour to give aid. In this comic, Fluttershy is the one in need of aid, and it's Rarity to the rescue. Rarity looks like the better, braver, and more knowledgeable pony, and while I do enjoy Rarity, we had her micro come out just a month before. It was awesome! My favorite of the bunch, but this is Fluttershy's micro. Instead of celebrating her best, it's showcasing her weaknesses. Imagine Fluttershy, understand the anxiety of the competition, went to each of the contestants Praiser Pan denounced and offered support. If she said a kind word or complimented something about the piece. Not only a great moment for her character, but a nice contrast between her constructive criticism versus Praiser Pan's destructive remarks. That's as real a part of Fluttershy as the scaredy pony who has a breakdown and threatens to destroy her own artwork before reconsidering. She asserts that she likes it, even if the audience does not. I'm of mixed minds on this. Constructive criticism is liquid gold, the chance to identify both strengths and weaknesses in a piece as a roadmap for a creator's development. It's disappointing that this style isn't represented in the comic, and there's no challenge to Fluttershy to develop her talent further. Yet I think it's important to take a moment to appreciate a simple fact. You made something. Doesn't matter how popular it's become or how much criticism or derision gets lobbed. Just by creating a piece of art, fiction, or other means of expression, you've done more than most. So in many ways, I do support Fluttershy's assertion. She made that statue, and she should be proud no matter what anyone else says. And again, because there is no constructive element to the other pony's words, the only sane reaction is to ignore them. Although we can't just leave it at that, can we?
Yeah, but I think we should do the mega happy ending.
Oh, the mega happy ending, that's doable.
Princess Celestia appears to praise Fluttershy's creation, which causes most ponies to shift gears. In this way, Praiser Pan is actually worse than Zesty Gourmand. I don't agree with her views on the culinary world,
But it takes a true culinary artist to create a subtle taste, the barest hint of a sensation.
but at least Zesty had the professionalism to keep her views limited to food, decor, and presentation. There's haughtiness, but no personal attacks as there were with Praiser Pan. And when popular opinion turned against her, Zesty had the fortitude to stick to her guns. I still think she's wrong, but I'd rather she change her mind through self-reflection rather than peer pressure. This hack critic abandons his opinion for status, but secretly shudders when he thinks no one is looking. So he's learned nothing and has had exactly zero change of heart. Meaning that while Twilight, Rainbow, and Rarity all help the lives of others in their micros, Fluttershy has left zero impression on others. I don't like this comic. And as a final bit of isolation, Fluttershy praises that her friends support her passion even though they don't understand the creative drive. She says this while Rarity is right there. There's nothing so frustrating as missed potential. Here's a story that explored an aspect of Fluttershy barely touched upon in the show. It sets the stage for Fluttershy to serve as a contrast to harsher and less insightful thoughts, but gets hung up on her own hesitation. This comic does a good job of recognizing Fluttershy's own fallibility, the things that hold her back from success. But when it comes to celebrating what drives her to overcome those obstacles, I don't think it shows enough understanding. It's easy to overlook Fluttershy's strengths because of her exaggerated weaknesses, but they are there. She is a pony who can have an impact on others and lead by example when given the chance. More than anything, she overcomes her fears for the sake of others. The chance was there for her to support others in need. I'm sorry this comic didn't seize that opportunity. Worse still, the ponies around Fluttershy don't come off any better. Though Praiser Pan has occupied the background in some later issues, there's nothing more to him. The audience knows he won't serve a function in other comics so long as he's nothing but negativity, which Fluttershy has already overcome. We would get an example of truly constructive criticism in the following micro starring Pinkie Pie. In there, her idol and comedy veteran, the clown pony Hachi, both praises her performance and points out areas for improvement. That is the kind of criticism from which one should never shy away. Ultimately, I want to end on a challenge to all creatives out there, including those aspiring to be critics. Because I do think that constructive criticism is an art in and of itself. Anyone can say something harsh, put down another's work, or feel empowered by denying encouragement to another. But the true voices for progress, those who put an emphasis on growth rather than attention, they're the voices to seek out. The voices that say what is being done well and how other parts can be improved. I'm Silver-Quill, and I wish you all well in your own endeavors.